So the question, why does the universe exist, by saying because the universe exists, like that doesn't actually answer the question. So that's where I think as they're kind of groping to discover the truth, they're falling short of what Christians would understand to be God. And the reason we've understood that is because it's been revealed to us.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Logos Podcast. This is Deacon Max.
This is Deacon Joey.
And on today's episode, we've got hot topics.
An interesting one.
Just off the wall. But not really, though. Off the wall for maybe our typical listeners. But maybe not. But maybe it is.
But maybe not.
But maybe it is. You know what I mean? Today we're going to be talking about and analyzing. Is that a fair word to use?
Discussing, analyzing.
Reflecting on, contemplating.
Yeah,
man, my freaking man. Hey, it's been a while since we got a good old freaking dap up on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been old school. So we're going to be analyzing, contemplating an interview between Rick Rubin and Cole Bennett. The actual YouTube kind of video is called Rick Rubin and Cole Bennett in Conversation, which seems to be kind of a spiritual, intellectual, student to teacher relationship in this conversation. And we'll talk about why we do it. And why we're talking about it.
But first. Just have to say welcome.
Welcome to our listeners.
You know, we usually have this whole shtick that I've been saying. I just want to say we're glad you're here. This podcast is about the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
Trying to help you love the truth. And the truth has a name, and it's Jesus Christ. And St. John called him the Logos, and that's who we're trying to introduce you to. And that's what we're excited about doing.
Yeah. Also, what we haven't been doing recently, and I want to start doing again, and I'm going to start doing that by doing this.
All right.
Please consider sharing our stuff, liking our stuff. Specifically, as we move into kind of
this. If they could just do one thing, what should they do?
They should go to YouTube and watch and comment on one of our videos.
Not subscribe?
Subscribe if you want.
Definitely subscribe.
But definitely like and comment.
If they had to choose between subscribing or liking and commenting, what would you prefer they do?
Liking and commenting. Why? You might ask yourself.
I am asking
Naturally,
myself.
that's a good question.
And you, I'm going to ask you why.
Because that actually helps build traction on the video. And so, you could go and subscribe, and obviously we want you to. But by you watching it, liking it, sharing it, what happens is it exposes it to more people. And so not just one subscriber, but now there's a possibility for 10, 15, 20 subscribers. So that's what I think.
That's actually helpful.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people who actually do like listening to Logos podcast, which is so cool. And then they'll say things like, I tell everyone I know about it. And that's awesome. Please keep doing that. But then another way you can help kind of get it out there is by doing precisely that.
Yeah. So there it is. That's the rationale. Nothing more.
Deacon Max, how are you, dude?
I am well. Let's see. The first 2 or 3 days of the week were a little bad with my sleep schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was a little tough. But yesterday.
You slept for like 15 hours and it just really.
It wasn't good. It really wasn't good. But yesterday and today have been good.
Better.
Reclaiming
good
my sleeping pattern by the grace of God. So things are good, man. Chilling. It was a good day of classes. And now
we've got family weekend this weekend.
Yeah, we do.
At the seminary.
Uh-huh.
Our last family weekend. And your family's traveling a long way to be here, which is sweet. Right.
Yeah, I'm excited to see them. So it'll be good. It's been a while since I've caught up with them. So that'll be fun. We have at seminary, what we call a good old flag football tournament here, right? And we get after it, let's say. The athletic prowess of Deacon Max and Deacons Max and Joey is on
formidable.
Formidable. It's very okay.
Yeah, in fact, neither of us are participating in the flag football game this year.
We might make a surprise appearance. You know what I mean? But anyways, I'm doing well, man. How about yourself? That's cool. So listen, guys, I'm really excited about today's episode. And you might be asking yourself, why are we talking about this, right? You might be asking yourself why we're talking about this. And the reason we're actually talking about this is because Rick Rubin and Cole Bennett actually are very influential people on the culture. And just a little biographical scope, if you're okay with us moving into that aspect of the conversation, Deacon.
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Okay. Rick Rubin.
Right. Actually, no, we can move on to the conversation. Overall, I'm doing well. This conversation, though, is interesting because I had no idea who these guys were before you.
And that shows you, world, the kind of man that is on this podcast.
Before you. Well, it's funny because I was talking to I have a Latin tutor. So
That's what you call white privilege.
Someone's teaching me Latin. It's a good buddy of mine. And I told him that we were going to be, and he was talking about the podcast. And I was like, yeah, we're doing an episode on this guy named like Rick Rubin. He was like the music producer. I was like, yeah, you know who that? Apparently everyone knows who it is.
Even his Latin scholar.
But now I do. But do you want to, in case our listeners are like me and they've lived under a rock for a long time, do you want to help tell them who Rick Rubin is?
I don't presume our listeners live under a rock, but should you not be aware of who Rick Rubin is specifically, or Cole Bennett, let me give you a little biographical scope here. So Rick Rubin is an American record producer, founder of American Recordings, co-founder of Def Jam Records, former co-president of Columbia Records. He is 61 years old, I think is what Google told me. So we're going to go with that. He's a married man, a family man. He is a famous music producer. And I think one of his particular claims to fame is that he's kind of a go back to the basics kind of guy. Go back to the fundamentals, to the rudimentary stuff. And in fact, in this interview, you get that sense. You're like, he's kind of the sage of the musical world in a certain way.
And he's worked with a lot of big time
guys,
names,
right? And yeah, in fact, at one point he was named most important producer of the last 20 years. I think in 2010 that was the case, which puts him now behind the ball. But that's a long time.
Yeah.
He was also credited to be one of the top 100 most influential people in the world.
That's pretty influential.
Yeah, by Time Magazine before they went out of print.
Holy moly.
Yeah, which is, that's big time. Time Magazine especially. That's big time.
Big time, if you will.
Big Time Magazine. And so to what you were just saying, he's worked with major musicians like the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Cool J, Johnny Cash, Kesha, Adele, Lady Gaga, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Weezer, Aerosmith, Kanye West, Deacon Max, Jay-Z, and the Avett Brothers. So it's just some big time musicians there that you may have heard of.
He worked with you.
Hey, look. What can I say? Hey, look, it's former life. We put on the new man. Put on the new man in Christ. Right. So obviously he's super important and super influential on the culture. And because of his life experience and connections, he's had a major impact. So that's a little bit of Rick Rubin.
And in the video we're going to be contemplating together, this video that's apparently kind of taken off and gotten a lot of traction.
Yeah, yes, right.
He's having a conversation with this guy named Cole Bennett.
Yeah.
Who, shocker, I also had never heard of until you.
Is that really a shocker, right? So it's not really a shocker at this point.
That's why I said it. It was for kind of like sarcastic.
Oh, it was comedic.
Yeah. But
that's when you know it's a terrible joke, Joey. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. I'm taking a lot of L's so far this episode.
Sorry, dude.
By the way, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. So Cole Bennett, who is he?
I don't know. You
I don't know
research on him?
Fine, I'll tell you about the research that you did and put on this outline right here.
That's the only way.
He's a music video director. That's fun.
He's
right. Apparently 28 years old. He started his career directing.
Apparently, did you see that in him? You saw the interview, you're 28 years old.
I just had a sense,
That's important.
I can read people like that.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
After I read about them on Wikipedia.
Boom.
So he started his career in Chicago and became famous as SoundCloud became a thing. What is Sound? I'm just kidding.
Oh, my heavens. I almost canceled this episode. I was like, all right, that's it. That's a wrap. Yeah.
So as that was becoming big for music producers, he started to become famous. And he has directed projects for rappers.
Some of your favorite ones.
Some of my favorite rappers. So Lil Pump. No, that's one guy. Lil Pump, Mask the Slump God. Lil Xan, Juice WRLD, J. Cole, Eminem, Deacon Max, Kanye. Oh, there's Deacon Max again. Wow, that's
well-known man. Deacon Joe, as you may.
Kanye West, Wiz Khalifa, Jack Harlow. You are, and Dr. Dre. So you're kind of in that list. That's
Dr. Dre, Deacon Max. I mean, there's really a lot of similarities if you think about it in that aspect. Yeah. So why are we talking about these guys? Off-kilter video on YouTube. We find it. We're like, hey, this is kind of cool. What is this about? They're influential people in the culture, right? And we've operated on this project with recognizing the fact that the culture has particular value structures that help inform the way people operate in the world, how they see the world, and how they believe truth to be or not to be. And so that's one of the main reasons that we're, I guess, talking about it. But what's your rationale behind wanting to talk about this?
Well, I think it'll be a helpful kind of exercise for you and I, but maybe even for our listeners to kind of understand how we as Christians should be dialoguing, interpreting, understanding what's going on in the world around us. So Rick and Cole in this video, they're talking about spiritual realities. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a spiritual conversation, as you mentioned. Neither of them are Christian, however. And so it's kind of a very secular spiritualism that they're talking about. And, you know, when Christians see stuff like this, I think usually there's one of two reactions, right? So I see these two guys talking about kind of like new age spirituality type stuff, and I can do one thing, which is to just immediately dismiss it as absolute garbage. Like, those guys don't know what they're talking about. They're not Christian. So like, I shouldn't even listen to anything they have to say. There's no point, right?
Yeah.
So that's one, and that's an understandable response, I think, for a lot of Christians,
especially when like most of them don't have the knowledge to be able to defend even their own beliefs.
Yeah,
I think it's a reaction.
Yeah, it's a fear. I mean, it's like, I don't like this. It's clearly contrary to the fullness of the truth, which is expressed in the Christian Catholic faith in particular. Mm-hmm. And so you think, I don't want to think about that. That sounds ridiculous, and I'm not even going to give it a second thought, right? So that's kind of one approach when we hear things like this. Another approach is to, of course, go the opposite direction and be kind of seduced by this kind of new agey spirituality and think, wow, maybe these guys are onto something. Maybe these guys actually have a truth that I don't have. Maybe I need to abandon my Christian faith and look into what they're,
or to be like all embracing to
about.
the expense of my own faith. And
beliefs.
That's
actually a really good way of putting it. But we want to propose, when you encounter anything like this, it could be a song, it could be a movie, it could be a conversation between two music producers. When you encounter anything like this, you should kind of take a third approach, which is neither of these two extremes. And it's the approach of people like St. Thomas Aquinas, who we've talked about before. It's the approach of St. Justin Martyr, who we've talked about before, and St. Paul, which I'll read a little thing from Acts of the Apostles. But the approach is this. It is to recognize that every human being is created for God. Every human being has a intellect that is ordered towards truth and a will that is ordered towards goodness and beauty. And when we see expressions of different religions, of different kind of spiritualities, even if they're not completely true, there is something in them that is revelatory of that search within the human heart, right? So, and we actually believe that people who have never benefited from Christian revelation, who have never actually known Jesus Christ and received the gospel, are capable not of attaining to the fullness of truth, because that can only be given from above, but are capable of starting to make steps on the way.
Yeah.
And so what Deacon Max and I love to do is look at the culture and see, like, okay, where are the areas in which people have already started taking steps along the path that they don't even know that they're on yet?
Correct.
Right? I don't know. Do you have anything to add about that kind of methodology?
No, I think that's right. And I think that's one of the reasons why we would take approach like the Dominicans, right, that have this idea, this phrase, seldom affirm, never deny, always distinguish.
Okay, say that again. And say it slowly, because this is, when I learned this kind of blew me away. So you're...
Seldom. Sorry. Can you keep a straight face?
When you, so when you encounter somebody who's presenting you with ideas that might be different from yours, this is what the Dominicans, at least who we've been informed by, and I don't know if it originates with St. Thomas or St. Dominic itself, but it's definitely a part of their ethos. So this is the response. What do they do?
Seldom affirm, never deny, and always distinguish.
So never deny. So I'm not going to come out and say, yes, everything you're saying is good. I'm going to be cautious in what I affirm.
Yeah.
Right? Because oftentimes there is a lot of error mixed in what people are saying.
Also, seldom affirm. That's important too, right? I'm not just going to jump on the bandwagon because you say it to be so.
Yeah.
It's like wait, okay, well let's talk about this a little bit, which leads us into that third part. Always distinguish.
Well, we skipped the never deny. So
that's the way you started. You said
I
never
didn't
deny.
start. You didn't listen.
No,
to me.
you didn't listen to me. Seldom affirm, never deny, always distinguish. It's important.
It's super important.
Yep. It's actually the way that we operate a lot of the ways. Like we've adopted this methodology in our own project.
And so what it means is, okay, I encounter these ideas that are not my own, that I've not seen before. And what is the recommendation? Don't seldom affirm them, right? So don't come out immediately and say, yes, that's all good, right? I'm going to be cautious about what I affirm in what somebody else is saying. Never deny. completely.
That's
outright,
hard.
right? Because again, the temptation is to be like, that's garbage. We want to get rid of that.
Yep.
And you see this in our political discourse all the time, right? Somebody comes to me from the opposite party and they propose an idea, and I'm immediately just like, get out of my face. This is garbage. But we're saying never deny, always distinguish. So like, I'm going to like really listen to what you're saying and then try to distinguish what's good, what's bad, right? So this is kind of the methodology we want to take. This is kind of I'm using that fancy academic word, methodology. I should stop using that word. It's the approach we want to take to encountering things like this.
It's the approach that actually St. Paul took.
Yeah. Do you want to read that?
Not really. It's a long quote. You want to read it?
I can read it. Yeah.
Thank you,
there's this great story, a great chapter in the Acts of the Apostles, Acts chapter 17, where St. Paul, who's trying to evangelize the world, comes to Athens. He comes to Greece and Athens in particular, and he sees all these pagans who are worshiping all these different gods. And again, so the one possibility for St. Paul when he sees these pagan people, is to say, this is all garbage. Get rid of this.
Somebody give me a sledgehammer. I'm about to take this to the streets.
I'm going to destroy this, and you guys are all wrong. But instead, listen to what St. Paul says. So in Acts chapter 17, it says, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, even some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers engaged him in discussion. Then Paul stood up at the Areopagus and said, you Athenians, I see that in every respect you are very religious. For as I walked around looking carefully at your shrines, I even discovered an altar inscribed to an unknown God. What therefore you unknowingly worship, I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all that is in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in sanctuaries made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands, because he needs anything. Rather, it is he who gives to everyone life and breath and everything. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your poets have said. And we actually mentioned this same experience in our episode on literature. Pope Francis was drawing attention to this. But he's saying, okay, you guys are wrong, right? You're pagans and you're not worshiping the true God, but you're onto something. You are very religious. And he tries to direct those religious inclinations that are already within their hearts towards the truth. So that's what we kind of want to try to do.
Yeah, and so like, we've said all that to simply say like, this is an expression of that, let's say, methodology, right? And so we want to now kind of actually listen to some of the clips we want to reflect on. So we're going to reflect on maybe 3 or 4 clips, and then help kind of expound on their ideas.
Just talk about them,
yeah, and say kind of maybe the good, the bad, affirm, deny, and never distinguish.
Okay, so this first clip,
they
start talking about this thing that they call the source, which is an interesting way to describe what they're talking about. So let's go ahead and listen to Rick and Cole talking about this out.
So this is a minute.
Summer solstice and the different rhythms of the universe and such. What to you, and this doesn't have to be, universe related or nature related, but when you hear the word the source, what's the source mean to you?
The source is the organizing principle of everything that we experience. So why does the grass grow? Why are the trees here? Why are we here? Why is everything here? And going back to the origination of everything, I call the source. It's like a universal wisdom, let's say. A generative force might be a better way to say it.
There it is.
What are your thoughts on that, Deacon Max?
Initially, like pretty insightful. For somebody that doesn't probably proclaim themselves publicly as a Christian, and holds to, I'm sure, different aspects of different spiritualities. I mean, that's kind of, if you're starting somewhere, that's a good start, right?
Yeah, in my mind, he just kind of described God.
Yeah, at least a particular aspect of who God is.
Yeah.
Right? So he is this idea of like an organizing principle. He even says generative force.
Generative force.
I mean, my thesis, admittedly, is like God is a creative dynamic of love.
Yeah.
Right? This idea of like creation comes from God. He's generative, right? And that's good. We should affirm that in him,
And this is important because we do hold as Christians. Actually, one of the things that we believe, one of our dogmatic beliefs, is that the human mind is capable of discovering the existence of God, even apart from divine revelation, right? And so here's a guy who is evidence of this, right? He has, in some respect, started to understand that behind everything that is, there must be a cause.
Yep.
And he's calling that cause the source.
The source. And I think this is what maybe some people that pick up some spirituality or hold to the fact that there's some sort of objective source of reality would maybe more easily identify as, instead of God, maybe use the word source.
Yeah.
And
why do you think he doesn't want to say God? Either of them.
I think, and so, right, so that's a good point. So like throughout the whole interview, there's just this kind of vague, ambiguous terminology to describe what we would consider in some aspects God. I think, honestly, is that to use the word God, capital G, comes with a lot of connotations.
Yeah, I agree. What kind of connotations?
They probably look at the ancient church, what they consider to be the ancient church, and her modus operandi, her way of operating and who she was, her identity. These clerics, these hardcore clerics that come with crosses and candles and say no to everything that you have to do. Or maybe they look to something like maybe Islam at its height and to say, okay, this is the same God of the Christians, kind of, they say. Both of them have themes of authority that are oppressive and destructive and lead to wars oftentimes. I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
The source that I worship, the God, let's say lowercase g, that I worship, is simply an originating principle. Some force that doesn't have much of a personality. It's there, and it's hard to deny when you look at reality.
Yeah.
But it's not that idea of what Christians or monolithic religions would hold as God.
No, I agree. I think I think this is right in the vein of people wanting to be spiritual but not religious, which is why I would recommend to Rick and Cole, if they ever met us, to go listen to our episode called "You Are Religious," which was an episode we did with Father Kyle Tennant. But yeah, God.
And admittedly, this conversation, I think, acknowledges that impulse. I mean, the fact that they're talking about this.
Yeah,
they're probably like, okay, they would be consider ourselves spiritual, right?
But we live in this unique moment in history where we had the Christian civilization, which came into existence as a result of the initial proclamation of the gospel, right? And then we had the Middle Ages, which most people think of as the Dark Ages, and like where there was no human progress, and which is of course not true. And then we had the Enlightenment, right? And then during the Enlightenment, what did we discover? We discovered that all that medieval and like mythological nonsense was precisely that, nonsense. And so we've kind of thrown off the shackles that were placed on our minds through all these religious institutions, and now we can actually look at the world rationally. But what's funny, and so we don't want to, the whole God hypothesis, right, is no longer relevant. Like we're not going to talk about God because that's what those strange medieval people used to do, right? Yeah. But what's funny is,
and look what that led to,
right? And I don't want anything to do with organized religion because it's all just weird and I don't want to hear about it.
It's all a power struggle. I mean, that's the idea.
Yeah. So I mean, all these other ideas, but now, I mean, what I want to do is just kind of like look at the world rationally. But what's funny is that people who are now in that state of mind, where like, yeah, religion has been proved to be irrelevant and not true, so I'm just going to be like not religious. But then now I'm finding myself talking about things like the source, which, if not in name, is conceptually the exact same thing as God in some respects, right? So it's just kind of funny how that progression has developed. Now, what would we say is problematic with what they're saying, or insufficient? Like, what would we want to distinguish here?
I think some of the things that we could distinguish is the association with the source and creation necessarily, right? So the source is the thing around us. We would say it's kind of a sort of worship of nature, at least the elevating of nature as some sort of God, or maybe containing God, and which is equivalent or close to proximity with materialism. It's a materialistic,
or pantheism,
right? And so you have this, and in fact, in one of the letters by the Council on, or was it the Committee on Culture, I believe, from the Second Vatican, or from the Vatican, wrote a letter.
I don't know. No. Oh yeah, is that?
And yeah, it's when I sent you. What's the name of that title?
I didn't read it.
Okay, anyways, there you go, guys. I'm glad that was captured on film.
I can pull it up right now.
But anyways, it talks about this tendency in the New Age, what they're calling New Age, quote unquote, spirituality, that highlights this idea that it tends towards as we'll critique, I think, at the end, is towards an impersonal God and an emphasis on God in creation, a pantheistic view of the world.
The document is Jesus Christ, the bearer of the water of life, and it's written by the Pontifical Council for Culture.
There we go. We were kind of close.
Or the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, also.
There we go. That. And so it warns us against these two things specifically: an impersonal God, right, and that God is limited to nature, to creation. Sometimes with these new age, let's say, broadly speaking, spiritualities, which I think it's the tendency you see.
Yeah, it's a very common tendency. The sense that there's something more, that there's something deeper than just, I don't know, the physical stuff that they see, that there has to be some sort of force that's governing their lives in some way and that's responsible for everything that exists. But then they can't kind of escape the bonds of a materialistic way of thinking. And so they just equate this force like with the universe itself. Like the universe itself is the source of all things in some way. And nature is governing things. And it's like, no, nature does not have a sufficient cause for itself within itself, right? Like you can't answer the question, why does the universe exist, by saying because the universe exists. Like that doesn't actually answer the question. So that's where I think as they're kind of groping to discover the truth, they're falling short of what Christians would understand to be God. And the reason we've understood that is because it's been revealed to us.
That's right. It's been revealed to us in Jesus Christ, right? Word made flesh as, first of all, a person in and of himself. Divine person.
Yeah, a personal God, right?
Yeah, right. And communion with persons. So precisely that's where I think ultimately this goes wrong. It's a denial, or at least a neglect of recognizing God, not to be some sort of impersonal force, but actually a personal God.
Yeah.
So there's that. So this is about providence and gratitude, more or less.
Yeah, and just for context, this clip comes at the tail end of Cole having recounted a story that took place earlier in his life. He was going through a difficult time, and he called his mom, and his mom told him to call Rick, who he's talking to in this video, to call Rick Rubin, because usually I guess he's a mentor for Cole and helps him feel better when he's feeling down. And Cole decided not to listen to his mom, but instead to go to the beach. And there at the beach, who was there?
How dare you, Cole, not listen to your mother? That's my first question.
That was his main problem.
Unbelievable.
But there at the beach, he kind of providentially, one might say, runs into Rick. Rick was there. He was like the only other person at the beach that day. And they actually ended up having a conversation. And so they're reflecting on that in this clip that we're about to listen to now.
Went back a few times. I've gotten a little
just
bit better.
Being in the water.
Yeah, no,
sitting on the board.
Completely disconnected from everything.
Yeah.
Followed, by us having that conversation right before, it was incredible in a moment that I'll never forget. And there's just a few moments like that, and it's important to recognize the signs, I think, and recognize that anything and everything that's happening around us is happening for a reason. And sometimes, I get so overwhelmed with work or, wanting to be in control of everything, and sometimes I just have to let go. And as of late, I've just realized that, I think gratitude is the most important thing for me, and intention and inventory are very important.
So there is more or less a clip there talking about highlighting providence and gratitude. He doesn't use the word providence, admittedly, but he does hint at the idea. That's what it seems to be. Fate, we could say maybe.
Yeah, everything and anything happens for a reason. So what are your thoughts on that when you hear him kind of reflecting on that experience?
I think distinguishing.
Seldom
affirming.
Never deny, always
deny. Always deny. No. We're going to confuse our listeners. Wait, what? Yeah. I think so yes, things happen for a reason. It's like a basic Christian notion.
But he's not a Christian.
No, you're right. Right. So, but things happen for a reason. Yes, that's good. We should affirm that. It's also good to be grateful. Very important. We talk about that on our podcast all the time. The disposition of the Christian needs to be that of gratitude. I say Christian, but everybody needs to be that of gratitude because life itself was given. And it has its own psychological benefits to live that way. So there's that. What would you say, similar?
Well, yeah, so that's true, but And Cole seems to be intuiting that those two things are the case. That yes, he even says everything happens for a reason. That the most important thing is gratitude. Okay, great. But again, if you're operating under the worldview that there is no God, that there's just some impersonal source or force behind everything that exists, then those two claims actually lose all of their meaning, right? Because it's only possible for everything to actually happen for a reason, if there is a mind, like an intellect that is governing all things, which is what we would describe as divine providence. God's mind truly is governing and directing everything that happens, everything that exists, which is why it's true to say that everything happens for a reason. But if there is no God, then that's a completely ridiculous statement.
Not only that, if there is no God that is personal, that goes back to our initial point. Only a God who is personal creates things that affect persons. Like that's part of the rationale here.
Right.
And as persons, we have the unique capacity to engage the world around us in a particular way, so as to bring us into closer or more distinct or distant union with ourselves, our neighbor, and God. So like, this is providence just there kind of as, again, this force, this impersonal kind of a pattern of reality limiting, right? Or is it, again, something that comes forth from the mind of a community of persons who happens to be God?
Which is then the only reason why you would ever say thank you, right? Because this whole idea of gratitude too. So Cole is tapping into this idea that, when I'm thankful for things, I feel better. Like I'm psychologically in a better state when I am feeling grateful. But here's the thing. If there's no God, then there's no one to whom you are actually grateful. There's no one to whom you can actually direct your gratitude. Gratitude only makes sense if there is a gift giver, if you have received a gift. And so Cole is intuiting that his life is a gift and that so many of the things happening in his life are gifts, but he's not yet making the leap to say, okay, there must be someone giving the gifts. Yeah. Not just like, I don't just say thank you to like the universe, because the universe doesn't want to receive my thanks. It's not a person.
It's
right?
neutral. It doesn't care.
Yeah. It doesn't care.
Yeah.
So those are the places where I'd say like, okay, they're on the way, but they're not quite there.
Yeah.
They're not quite there.
That's right. I think it's fair. Cool. So this third clip, I think it's Rick Rubin. Maybe highlights this.
I think it's Rick Rubin. Yeah.
What is it about? You highlighted this area.
We're talking about love.
What is love?
That was some of the musical talent that Rick Rubin actually saw in Deacon Max and tapped into to help him produce his big. Do you have albums? Were they albums that you dropped?
Look, man, maybe I go under a different name. You ever thought of that? Maybe I am Alicia Keys. Just kidding. I wish.
Yeah,
but I'm not.
I'm really glad that you're not Alicia Keys, because I'd have to stop listening to her. Anyway, they're talking.
Why are you so mean to me?
See, you know what I was thinking about the other day? You do this thing where anytime I take a shot at you, you make a big deal out of it. You're like, dude, that was so mean. But then you just take shots at me constantly, and I'm like, I just laugh it off.
That's not true.
All right, listeners can be the judge.
No, it's super true. Super true. It's super true.
Okay.
Now it's awkward because I'm thinking about all the trauma I've received being on this podcast over the last 4 years. That's a lot. It's quite a lot. And I'm not sure I want to continue doing this.
We should call Dr. Peter, who our listeners haven't heard yet because we haven't released that episode, but they will. They'll meet him one day. Okay, anyway, they're going to be talking about love in this clip.
Should I sing it again? No. All right.
Interlude. And one thing I've always wanted to ask you about is love and how love inspires you and how you think love can bring power to people.
Love is what we're always on the hunt for. And when I say that, it's in art. When we're making something, it's a search for love. Anything we make. And that feeling of falling in love with something happens when if you've fallen in love in your life, it usually happens in an unexpected way. It's not like, today I'm gonna fall in love, and you go make it happen. It doesn't happen that way. It's you're surprised by love. And we experience that when we're making things all the time. Like we're toiling away on this thing we think we're making, and then all of a sudden love shows up in a different way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it turns into something different. it's rare that it's premeditated.
Yeah.
I don't know that it can be really and be love.
Right.
You know, it could be something else, but the love, there's some aspect of taking you by surprise.
Absolutely. I think the idea of love is it kind of breaks all structure and things can morph and grow into something that you never expected through love. It's like you kind of have to take your hands off the steering wheel when it hits you and just follow the.
Right. It's a basic point. There's a lot, actually a lot to unpack there. Now that I'm rewatching that clip.
Yeah.
The first thing that I think stuck out to me is that love is, like, period. You know, like there is a such thing that exists as love.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's worth pointing out because I think a lot of people don't believe even in the power of love anymore, or maybe they, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. You know, maybe they have a particular view of love, maybe a limited view of love. I also want to hit on that point of kind of creativity is a search for love, is an expression of trying to reach out and grasp for love. I remember one time a priest who is a mutual friend of ours, he was talking about the festivities of Christmas around the church. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he dedicates a lot of time to decorating the church, to making things beautiful, to putting up the beautiful Christmas tree, the nicest saints, the most beautiful incense smelling stuff, the vestments, the whole shebang, you know, and it goes on during the Christmas season. And sometimes, you know, he was saying that some of his friends and priest friends would say, like, why are you spending so much time doing that? Like, aren't there other things to do? And his response is like, this creation of mine is kind of my expression of love to God the Father. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, maybe this own project is hopefully an expression of that too, to a certain extent. Like, Lord, we love you. This is kind of what you've given us. And this small thing is our oblation to you, God. Like, this is what we have. And I think there's something insightful about that. Like, creativity is a search. What is a pattern of life? What is reality? Where are you, God? Like, I'm doing these things out of hopefully love for you. So anyways.
Yeah. And I think Rick Rubin he's accurate. He's tapping into something true there. And he even says that love is what we're all on the hunt for. Yeah. Right? Like in everything that we're doing, we're looking for love, which sounds a lot like something Mother Teresa once said, like, we're all created to love and to be loved. Right. Like so he's intuiting something very true about reality, which is, again, something we want to affirm. And I also had a thought, just this is tangential, but one of the reasons this video probably took off is because it's very peaceful. Like, it's very quiet. Yeah. They're having a very kind of intimate dialogue, and a lot of people don't have that in their lives. So probably that's why people. Yeah,
they're in Tuscany, Italy, by the way. I think it's
super beautiful background.
Yeah.
All right, whatever.
Hey, one day we'll shoot a podcast in Tuscany. Wait,
when
they shoot
a podcast in Rome.
How about say when they shoot a podcast in Rome in front of the Pia Jesu? Come on, anyway, beautiful encounter there. Yeah. Anyways, so but he also has this, just to mention, a mystery kind of he mentions.
Yes.
Right? Tap into that.
You can't control it, right? So I mean, this is something, and even Chris Stapleton, when we did the song on the bottom, love is a mystery. That's how it starts, right? And
you heard that? Say that again, just one more time.
No, because then Rick Rubin will show up and try to endorse me as an artist.
And you're just all raw talent.
I'm trying to pursue the priesthood.
I got you.
So you might be trying to do the music thing. I'm trying
you know, that's kind of insulting. You know why that's insulting?
Why?
Because it means that if I'm trying to do the music thing and I am in seminary, I have failed at the music thing. That's what that means.
Well, your claim is that Rick Rubin's helped you produce 2 albums under the fake name of Alicia Keys.
The pseudo name of Deacon Max is actually Alicia Keys. No, I'm kidding. Alicia Keys, you're awesome. Great music.
What was I saying? I was saying that mystery. Yeah. So he's right, I think, in tap. So anyone who listened to this and was like, yeah, he's right. Like, I think he is right about it in a certain respect. Like, you can't control certainly the experience of falling in love. You can't like go out and just like experience ecstasy or some sort of like intense emotional, like loving experience just because you choose to. It is kind of something you receive. It's something you discover. It's kind of a gift.
It's not kind of a gift.
It's definitely a gift.
There you go.
Did you have any thoughts about the love being a mystery thing?
We've talked about it on our podcast before, right? So a mystery. Now, I don't know how he's defining mystery,
right?
Admittedly, but we would say it's true. Love does have a dimension of mystery, but it's not mystery. But by mystery, we don't mean something that is not at all knowable or like kind of in the air, that we try to catch with our Tupperware container. We're saying mystery has, yes, a dimension of the unknown, but it is still knowable.
Yeah.
There's a dimension that is in fact able to be grasped, but not completely grasped.
Which I think is related to what is lacking in their understanding of love, right? Because both of them, both Rick and Cole, in this little encounter, which they talk about love, and they keep talking about it after this in the clip, but are talking about it precisely as a feeling, right? As something, as an emotional experience, or even a spiritual experience that you get swept off your feet in love of a woman, or in love of the whatever song you're producing, or whatever it might be, and then Cole says, yeah, you have to let go completely. You have to take your hands off the steering wheel and just let yourself be governed, in a sense, by this emotion. And we have a different understanding of that, as has been revealed to us by the Lord.
The Logos, baby.
That love, at its core, is not a feeling, even though love is often accompanied by feelings.
And affectivity is an important part of love.
For sure. But at its base, love is to will the good of the other. It's to choose to do what is good for the other, even when that feels absolutely terrible to me, even when I am being crucified.
That's maybe another place where we could say was limited in this idea of love, that love is in fact intentional.
Yeah,
right?
It's not just
coincidental or breaks all bounds. No, like love has an order to it. It has a particular way, as expressed in the cross, as the paradigmatic way of love, right? But love has a particular way in which it's expressed, even as something as simple as like a friendship, or as simple as a marital bond. Like, you do these things to express my love, to express the other person's love of this friendship, of this whatever. Like, there's an order to it. You don't just kind of wake up and be like, all right, let's see what love's got in store for us today.
Right.
You have to take a choice. You have to make a choice of the will. Like a husband would have to make a choice of the will to wake up in the morning for his wife. Exactly.
And even when, if, like, let's say I took this kind of shallow understanding of love and ran with it and based my life on it, then all of my decisions would be seeking this experience of falling in love, knowing that it is kind of mysterious and it's going to be given to me at different times when I don't expect it. But still, if love is just this feeling, then what happens when, I don't know, I'm married with kids and they start to really get on my nerves, and my wife isn't as beautiful as she was when I married her when she was 20, and now I don't feel exactly the same way. I don't feel like I'm being swept off my feet. What am I going to do? I might leave. I might opt out.
Yeah.
But that's not real love. Love requires often sacrifice.
Yeah.
And when we say that God is love, right, that the source that these guys think that they are approaching is in reality love, it's because he is a communion of persons who pour themselves out for the other.
Yeah. Cool. Is that what you had to say?
No, I think that's it.
Cool. All right, so we're going to move to this fourth topic, a little fourth
and final,
clip.
which is a really, really interesting one.
It is, and I would say out of all of them, it's the most nuanced. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Okay. Here we go. So this is on suffering and stress, and this comes from minute 22 going into 23:40. So here we go.
That has 365 lessons, and you do one lesson every morning, and then you repeat the lesson through the day, and it's pretty interesting.
Hearing you talk, every interview I watch, every conversation we have, I'm just blown away and taken back by the space in which your mind sits at, and it seems to always be in a peaceful place. Stress. I want to talk about the idea of stress. One thing I always try to live by, but it's not easy to, is the fact that stress is not a requirement, and trying to release myself from the idea of the fact that it even exists, much like fear. How do you handle stress when you're faced with it?
It's stress is suffering, and there's a whole Buddhist concept about suffering, which is there is suffering, but you don't have to suffer. There's pain, and there really is pain, but the suffering part of it is something. You can have pain, but you don't have to suffer. You can accept. In acceptance, usually the how do I say it? Usually the suffering comes from some feeling that something's supposed to be different than the way it is. And if you accept the way it is, then there's no suffering. And you can't change what is. You can change how you deal with what is, but what is what is.
Okay, I think we capture the point there.
Yeah.
Of the specific scene.
Okay, what do you think about that? Because there's a lot going on there.
I would like to have a conversation with Rick Rubin and maybe other.
You mean like another conversation in addition to the ones that you've already clearly had with him?
I would like to have a conversation with Rick Rubin about this specific episode.
Okay.
I might call him after this podcast and see what this is all about. And those Buddhists that he maybe is kind of
being formed by.
Right. And ask what's the distinction between pain and suffering. I mean, I think they're trying to articulate here, but in real time, I don't know that there is a difference. Maybe conceptually. And so maybe we can elaborate a little on that to help me maybe understand something I'm missing, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But I would want to ask that. Like, what is the difference between pain and suffering? Why can't we admit that both exist? And both are a symptom of something that isn't right. Something like that. So that's kind of my first approach. I would say my first kind of question, more than a question. But I think, obviously in this scope, it's first recognizing that there is an objective reality. He affirms the existence of pain.
And of what is.
Exactly.
Right?
And so.
Now you can't change what is, he says.
You got to conform yourself to what is. And to the extent that you live in what is, you're free. Fair enough?
I think that's right. I think he's right about that to a certain extent.
He also does recognize the need to kind of abandon ourselves to divine providence.
Well,
to take that step.
This is where I think it's insufficient.
Okay. Talk to me.
Okay, so Rick Rubin is intuiting, it seems to me, that when you encounter suffering in some way, there is the approach that you take to that suffering is going to radically alter your experience of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And he even seems to be adopting something that approximates a Christian's abandonment to divine providence.
Say more.
So let's think about Our Lady at the foot of the cross.
I love thinking about Our Lady at the foot of the cross.
Yeah, me too.
Is that a joke to you?
No, it was not a joke to me. Mary is experiencing intense suffering. The sword that Simeon prophesied would pierce her heart is in fact piercing her heart as she's watching her son suffer and be crucified and having been innocently and falsely accused. And she's watching all of this as the mother. Now, Rick Rubin, based on this philosophy that he just outlined for us, would say something along the lines of, Mary, you can't change what's happening now. And the reason that you're experiencing emotional turmoil is because you think that what's happening now is somehow wrong or that it ought to be otherwise. But if you just accept that this is what is, then the suffering will go away. Now, I don't think that's true. I don't think that I don't think that in a situation like that, something is even really possible. But he is, so like Mary, what is Mary saying at the foot of the cross? She's saying in her heart and in her mind the same thing that she said at the moment of the Annunciation, which is, behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done unto me according to thy word, right? Let it be done unto me. She is surrendering to what is happening. And in that sense, Rick Rubin's kind of intuition is right. She's surrendering to what is taking place. But she's not just surrendering to it as some sort of brute fact that she has to conform herself to and that isn't in fact wrong. She's surrendering to it as something that is wrong, a real suffering that is taking place, but that is being allowed by the will of her heavenly Father who loves her. Let it be done unto me according to your word, according to your will. Fiat voluntas tua, thy will be done. It is because I know that what is happening right now, even though it is intensely wrong and shouldn't be this way, I know that it's taking place in my life ultimately because it is under divine providence, ultimately because the Father, the true source who knows me and loves me and is working all things together for my good, is allowing this to happen right now. And if I surrender myself to him in faithful trust and loving obedience, the suffering will not go away. Okay, so Rick Rubin is trying to eliminate the suffering. He's trying to get rid of it completely. The suffering that Mary's experiencing at the foot of the cross doesn't go away when she abandons herself. It is real, but it is changed. It's changed into an act of love. It's changed into an offering that she can make to the Father in union with her Son on the cross, who's also making the offering, right?
Yeah. That, first of all, you really thought about that, because this is a hard thing, I have to admit to you, to come to terms, to understand, first of all, because it's a particular maybe spiritual tradition that we're not super experts in, but I think he captures that idea that he's obviously living by. And I think because of that too, it undermines, in my view, kind of the body and matter itself, for the sake of this view of suffering seems to actually avoid what takes place in real time to us here and now, right? And it's actually not helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because are we going to deny the kid who just lost his mother and say, well, you're not really, I mean, yes, you're in pain.
If you just accept what is, you won't suffer
exactly.
anymore.
Yeah. Turn your mind and your will towards something else, and your affectivity will follow, and you will escape it. And it will no longer be. And if you can train yourself after that method, you will no longer actually ever suffer.
And there might be people in this world who can develop such self-mastery over their thoughts that they're able to change the way that they're thinking about things in such a way that they can mitigate suffering. But I don't think you can escape it completely. I think suffering is really real. So and so the kid who just lost his mom, I would say you should accept what is, but not just for the sake of escaping the suffering and abandoning yourself to this brute fact.
Did Christ suffer?
Yeah, right.
Did Christ suffer? Yes, he suffered, right? But he also redeemed suffering. It's because of him that suffering is redemptive. Like you said, takes on a new meaning. It's not just non-existent, right? It's not ideal. We're not saying it's ideal either, but it's capable of saving us now because of him who entered into that suffering.
Yeah. I mean, the child who lost his mother should accept what is, but he should do it trusting in his heavenly Father and trusting that even in the midst of this suffering, God is working it all for his good.
Exactly. And part of what is entering into that suffering.
Yeah. Yes. It's not escaping it.
Exactly.
And this is the paradox of Christianity, right? Because Jesus did not come to take away all of our suffering. And certainly as Christians, we want to work to alleviate suffering whenever we possibly can. We're not saying that suffering is a good thing, but it's ultimately a result of the fall, right? Rick Rubin is implying that somehow things aren't wrong. Things aren't messed up. Ultimately things are the way they are, and you should just accept that. But we would say as Christians, no, things are messed up. This world is full of sin and death and pain and suffering. Those are realities. And it ought not to be that way.
Yep.
And it is that way ultimately because of sin, original and my own personal sins, which compounds that in my own life. And so when Christ came to save us from that, he didn't necessarily come to take away the suffering. He came to transform the suffering by filling it with his presence.
Yeah.
And so that's that's what Rick Rubin, as he's trying to grapple with this, and Cole Bennett too, as they're trying to grapple with this reality of suffering and the experience of it and how to experience peace. They're groping at the answer, and they're approaching, something that's maybe on the way, but everything that I just said to you and that we just talked about in this explanation of suffering, it's nothing that we could have made up by ourselves.
No.
Right? It's nothing that no matter how smart we are, no matter how much of a guru we are, we couldn't figure this out somehow. This had to be revealed to us by the Father through the Son.
And it doesn't explain the complexity of suffering either.
No.
Its existence or lack thereof. That's not what we're trying to say either. But we are trying to say that this is the Christian way of dealing with something like suffering, right? So those are some of the clips that we found insightful, also kind of worth diving into.
Yeah, seeds of the truth.
Yeah,
right?
seeds of the truth. There you go. Seeds spermaticus.
Logos spermaticos.
Logos spermaticus. That's St. Justin Martyr.
Yeah.
Right? So the seeds of the truth.
Seeds of the word.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other parts. I don't know. Was there anything in this video, Deacon Max, in case any of our listeners have seen it or will go watch it? I'm not recommending you go watch it. It's not that crazy. But given the fact that it was so popular, we wanted to talk about it.
And, you know, I mean, we have to admit, and maybe we should have made this caveat to begin with. Like, it's popular in particular creative circles. You know, I mean, it has a couple, maybe 100,000, you know, views at this point. It came out a few days ago, but they're kind of cultural masters in a certain way. They're kind of
influencers for sure.
Yeah, major influencers and not of small gravity. And so if we could tap into it, reach a new audience, help y'all understand, and also give y'all the perspective of the church on these matters. Yeah, there's a little bit of that at least. So I guess we are representing the church in that way.
But if you are in those circles that you follow Rick Rubin and Cole Bennett, and you watch this episode and you were like, wow, I'm like tracking with what these guys are saying, it's because your heart was made for God. And like the Athenians and the Areopagus in the time of St. Paul, you are groping for him and searching for him, and in him you live and move and have your being, even if you don't know it. And even though and what they're describing in this video are just hints at what is ultimately true.
And I've never heard you say the word groping until this episode, and you've now said it 5 times.
Well, I think it's a powerful word.
I get it. It is a powerful. I just think it's funny because it's just not a particular word that I've seen. Yeah, I heard you use, and so I guess thank you for adding vocabulary to this podcast. I guess that's what I'm saying.
You're welcome.
Gracias. So, guys, that's what we have for you on today's episode. Keep doing what you're doing, which I hope is praying for us and sharing our stuff and loving God above all. And we hope you'll learn something on this episode. And we'll be back. We have a lot of cool things coming up, a lot of exciting news for you guys. But for now, this is a snippet that you get. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Logos Podcast. And as always, God bless.